Sunday mornings in my house used to feel sacred. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the faint scent of roses from the garden Malcolm planted, and a steaming cup of Earl Grey on the kitchen table. It was my small ritual. I carried the mail in under my arm, expecting nothing more than grocery flyers and a utility bill. The first envelope was heavy ivory colored with gold lettering that shimmered in the morning light. I slid it open and pulled out a card embossed with curling vines and scripted letters. Thank you for hosting the engagement dinner of Arabelle and Elliot at Bella Vista Hotel. We hope you and your family had a memorable evening. I blinked at the words, reading them twice as if repetition might make them make sense. My own daughter had her engagement dinner last night, and I hadn't been there. My hands stiffened around the card, the edges biting into my palm. The kitchen seemed to expand with the echo of its emptiness, a cavern where laughter used to live. I walked to my laptop on the counter, the card trembling in my fingers, and opened my email. The first subject line read, "Your purchase at Bella Vista. $8,500 confirmed." My heart dropped into my stomach. I clicked it open and saw the details: banquet deposit, floral arrangements, wine selection, all charged to the emergency credit card I'd given Arabelle 3 years ago for safety, not celebrations. My pulse thudded in my ears. $8,500. A month of my pension gone without a word. My daughter hadn't just left me out of her special night, she had used me to pay for it. I sank into Malcolm's old chair by the window, the same chair where he used to read the Sunday paper, and let the weight of it settle over me. My fingertips brushed the worn fabric of the armrest, as if reaching for his steadiness. The card lay open in my lap, its golden letters glaring up at me like a cruel joke. I stared at the gold lettering and the zeros on my screen, realizing I had bought myself an absence. I closed my eyes, and in that silence, the house felt colder than it had in 7 years, as if the walls themselves understood that something sacred had been stolen. The sunlight slanted across the living room, catching on the dust motes that danced in the still air. I hadn't moved from Malcolm's chair. The thank you card lay on the coffee table, and the email confirmation still glared from my laptop screen on the counter, though I couldn't bring myself to close it. Once this room had been alive. I could almost hear Malcolm's laughter echoing against the walls, deep and easy, the kind of laugh that made everyone else smile. I could see little Arabelle and Gavin racing through the hallway socks, sliding on the hardwood floors, squealing as their father pretended to chase them with a dish towel. I used to scold them for tracking dirt in from the garden, but secretly, I loved the chaos. It meant we were together. Now the house was only a museum of my own devotion. Malcolm's reading chair remained exactly where it had always been, its cushions slightly indented, as if waiting for him to sit down again. The garden he planted bloomed outside the window, roses in deep pink and ivory flowers he'd chosen for me because they reminded him of wedding dresses. No one noticed them now but me and the bees. I thought of the years after he died when I sold my grandmother's pearl earrings to help cover Arabelle's tuition, assuring her she could take the out-of-state program she wanted. I remembered the quiet humiliation of wiring money for Gavin's third business venture, the one he swore would finally take off. Each time I told myself it was what mothers did, that giving was love. Somewhere in the last decade, I became a background prop in my own life. I was the supporting beam that kept everyone else standing invisible until they needed to lean on me again. The walls felt heavier now, lined with photographs of birthdays and graduations. I noticed for the first time that in the newest pictures I was missing. Smiling faces of my children and their friends, their partners, their milestones. Yet I had been carefully cropped out like a piece of furniture that clashed with the decor. I rose from Malcolm's chair, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the hallway where the frames hung like silent witnesses to my absence. I was still standing in the hallway when the front door creaked open and Gavin's voice drifted in. "Mom, you home." He appeared with the casual ease of someone who treated the house like a pit stop rather than a home. His hair was messy, his t-shirt wrinkled, and a faint smell of cologne followed him in. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys onto the console. "Can I borrow your car tonight? I've got a date with Brielle and mine's acting up again." I leaned against the doorway to the living room, forcing my voice to stay steady. "A date? And how's Brielle?" "She's great. Think you'll like her," he said, already glancing toward the hook where my car keys hung. I let the pause stretch before asking as casually as I could manage. "By the way, when is your sister's engagement dinner?" The question landed like a pebble in a still pond. Gavin froze for a heartbeat, his hand hovering near the keys. He didn't meet my eyes. "Oh, yeah," he mumbled, scratching the back of his neck. "They had it yesterday. Just family, you know." The words "just family" slid into me like a knife I hadn't seen coming. "Just family," I repeated softly. He gave an awkward shrug. "Arabelle's been stressed. She wanted to keep it small, intimate. You know how she gets about planning stuff." I looked past him into the living room, where the family photos lined the shelves. In the oldest pictures, Malcolm held a baby in each arm, his face lit with pride. But the newer frames, Arabelle with Elliot at a vineyard, Gavin with Brielle on a weekend trip, had no trace of me. My life had been edited out, erased frame by frame. Gavin jingled the keys like nothing had shifted. "I'll have it back by midnight." I nodded, though my throat felt tight, and watched him disappear out the door. When the house went silent again, I turned toward the photographs, my eyes tracing the empty spaces where I no longer existed, and felt a chill run through me as I realized how easy it had been for them to remove me. I moved slowly through the house, letting my hand graze the walls as if the paint itself could remind me I still lived here. Every room carried echoes of who I used to be, though the evidence of my life was disappearing piece by piece. The bookshelf in the hallway still held Malcolm's well-worn novels, but the framed photos on top told another story, a family that had learned to smile without me. In the dining room, the long table I once dressed with linen and candles for Christmas dinners sat bare, its surface gathering dust. I thought back to 2 years ago, the first holiday after Arabelle got serious with Elliot. I had cooked all day, waiting for the knock on the door only to receive a text hours later. "We're so sorry, Mom." Elliot surprised me with a resort trip. "We'll celebrate when we get back." I had eaten reheated stuffing alone that night, the sound of the wind outside louder than the clink of my fork against the plate. As I walked into the kitchen, my gaze fell on the empty space above the refrigerator where Malcolm's hand-carved bread box used to sit. I'd given it to Arabelle when she moved into her condo. She'd said it made the place feel homey, yet she never invited me to see it. My life had been stripped down to the things they didn't want. I built their lives like scaffolding. I whispered to the empty room, only to be left standing alone in the wind. A tremor of anger rippled through the grief, small but steadying. I could feel something, shifting, a line being drawn in the quiet of my chest. I was done waiting for invitations that would never come done, begging for crumbs of affection from people who only saw me when I was useful. I turned toward the hallway, the family photos glinting under the soft light. My reflection in the glass was faint, almost transparent. For the first time, I wondered if reclaiming myself meant letting go of them entirely, and the thought both terrified and steadied me as I headed for the kitchen counter where my laptop still waited. I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop open, the cursor, blinking like a metronome, counting down to a choice I could no longer delay. My fingers hovered over the phone before I pressed the number for the credit card company. The representative's voice was calm and professional, but my own shook as I explained that my daughter had been using my card without permission. I listed the charges: the hotel banquet deposit, the florist, the catering services. When the woman read the total back, $15,800, it felt like someone had carved the number into my chest. "Yes, please freeze the card immediately," I said, my voice steadier now, "and start the fraud investigation." After I hung up, I logged into my bank account. Gavin's name was still there, attached to a card I'd added after his last layoff. I thought of the countless excuses he'd offered, the half-hearted promises to pay me back. With 2 clicks, I revoked his access. By the time he tried to buy his next tank of gas, his card would be declined. The silence in the house felt different now, no longer a void, but a space where something inside me was shifting. I opened my email to gather documentation for the lawyer I'd already decided to call Janet Morrison, who had handled Malcolm's estate. While scanning through transactions, one subject line froze me. "Thank you for your purchase. Bridal collection." My stomach tightened as I clicked it open. $2,000 for a necklace and earrings Arabelle had charged to me, ordered just 2 weeks before her secret engagement dinner. I stared at the receipt, heat rising to my cheeks. Love didn't mean financing my own disappearance. I sent Janet an email requesting an urgent appointment to revise my will. For the first time in decades, I felt a tremor of control return to my hands. I wasn't raising children anymore. I was protecting myself. The house was still and bright, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator. I closed the laptop with a decisive click, feeling the first edge of resolve take root as the phone began to buzz across the counter. A week passed in a strange, weightless quiet. No knocks at the door, no text messages with hearts or smiley faces asking for little favors. I spent my mornings pruning the roses in the garden, watching petals scatter in the breeze, feeling as if I were trimming away pieces of a life that no longer belonged to me. On Thursday afternoon, my phone lit up with Arabelle's name. I let it buzz 3 times before I picked up. "Mom." Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. "The florist says the card didn't go through. Did you forget to pay?" I pressed the phone to my ear, my eyes on Malcolm's chair across the room. "No," I said evenly. "I didn't forget. I just remembered who I am." Silence hummed on the line for a moment, then came the first wave of pleading. "Mom, please, the wedding is in 6 weeks. We need those centerpieces, the deposit is due. If we lose this vendor, the whole plan falls apart." When I didn't answer, her voice softened into that lilting sweetness she used to employ as a teenager when she wanted something expensive. "You've always been there for me. You're the best mom. I just need your help this one last time." The sweetness cracked into accusation without warning. "Are you really going to ruin my wedding over some stupid card? Everyone's going to be talking about how cheap I look if I can't pull this off. Do you want that for me?" I held the phone in both hands and realized my fingers weren't trembling. I felt something else instead, an unfamiliar steady heat spreading through my chest. It was the power of a single word I had avoided for 30 years. "No, Arabelle," I said quietly. "I'm not doing this anymore." She sputtered, half in disbelief, half in anger, and hung up on me. I set the phone down on the counter, the room returning to its serene hum, and felt the edges of my resolve harden, like cooling steel. Through the kitchen window, the late sun lit the roses in full bloom, and I turned toward the hallway, already thinking of the locks on my doors. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought new locks for every door. The clerk, a white-haired man with kind eyes, carried them to my trunk and said, "Changing locks is easier than people think." I nodded, feeling a current of quiet resolve humming in my chest. By noon, the old keys were useless. The metallic click of the new deadbolt sliding into place felt final and liberating, as if each turn erased a little of the power my children had over me. Gavin's leftover sneakers and crumpled hoodie went into a box on the porch with a note Pickup by Friday. His smell, faint and familiar, was gone from the hallway by afternoon. When the last door closed, I walked through the house and noticed how different it felt. Lighter, airier. For the first time in years, the silence wasn't heavy with disappointment. It was gentle, like the pause after a deep breath. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock and the distant hum of bees in the garden, and instead of loneliness, I felt space that belonged to me. That evening, I saw Elizabeth Duncan tending to her roses across the fence and waved. She waved back, hesitated, then walked over with a small tin of cookies. We ended up drinking tea on my porch, our knees touching the sunlight that slipped between the railings. She listened without interruption as I shared pieces of my story, how Arabelle had excluded me, how Gavin used my home like a motel. Elizabeth nodded knowingly and after a long pause said, "It's strange, isn't it? We spend decades teaching them to stand only for them to climb on our backs." I laughed and the sound startled me. It felt like the first laugh in my own home in years. For the first time, I felt seen without paying for the privilege. When the evening cooled, I watched Elizabeth walk back across the grass, the scent of roses drifting behind her. I lingered on the porch, holding my tea, thinking that tomorrow I might finally face the world on my own terms and see who would try to step back in through the locked doors. By Monday morning, the first ripple of retaliation hit. I logged onto Facebook to check a gardening group and saw Arabelle's latest post at the top of my feed. Some people would rather die bitter than see their daughter happy. The words burned without naming me, yet everyone knew who she meant. By noon, the phone began buzzing with calls from cousins and in-laws I hadn't heard from in months. "Aunt Celestine, what's going on?" one asked. "Arabelle says you're refusing to help, and the wedding is in crisis." I listened to each voice calm and measured, and then quietly emailed the credit card statement, the one showing every charge she had made without my consent. I didn't type a single word in the body of the email. The truth didn't need my commentary. By evening, the sun was dropping low when the real siege arrived. A pounding on the front door rattled the glass, followed by Gavin's voice yelling, "Mom, open up, we need to talk." I waited until the pounding turned into a desperate rhythm, then opened the door just enough to see their faces. Arabelle's eyes were red and swollen. Gavin's jaw was tight with frustration. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" Arabelle cried. "You're destroying this family. You're humiliating me, Mom." "Everyone will think you don't care about me," Gavin chimed in. "We're trying to fix this, but you're making it worse." I held the doorframe, feeling the cool wood under my fingertips, and met their eyes. "You didn't invite me to the dinner?" I said, my voice steady. "Don't invite me to the disaster." For a moment, they had no words. The wind from the garden rustled the porch leaves, carrying the faint scent of roses between us. Arabelle sobbed once sharply, and Gavin muttered something under his breath as they turned and walked down the steps. I closed the door softly, slid the new deadbolt into place, and leaned against it, my heart steady as stone. The house fell silent again, and in that quiet, I realized that the next move was finally theirs. 2 days after the confrontation at my door, a quiet knock came at dusk. Through the window, I saw Elliot standing on the porch, his posture hesitant, a man carrying the weight of truths he could no longer ignore. I opened the door, and he removed his baseball cap, eyes lowered in something close to shame. "Mrs. Ward," he said softly, "I hope it's okay that I came." I nodded and stepped aside. He entered carefully, as if afraid to disturb the calm I had built. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "I had no idea Arabelle used your card like that, or that she didn't invite you. I thought you just didn't want to come." His voice cracked on the last word. I gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "The wedding is off," he said simply. "I can't build a life on lies and debts that aren't mine. This is for you." Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $500, half of the charges, he explained. "It's not all of it, but it's the part I should have known about. It's my responsibility, too." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Gratitude swelled in my chest, not just for the money, but for the rare, clean note of respect it represented. "Thank you, Elliot," I said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." "I did," he replied, meeting my eyes for the first time. "Because I want to leave knowing I treated you the way you deserve to be treated." After he left, the house felt lighter, the air cleaner. Word of the canceled wedding spread quickly. I saw the shift online and in the sudden quiet from relatives. Arabelle's curated world had cracked, and the reflection she'd avoided was now inescapable. I sat in Malcolm's chair, the evening light pooling across the floor, and let the feeling wash over me. It wasn't triumph exactly. It was something steadier, a quiet validation that life could hold dignity even when family had failed to see it. The last traces of guilt ebbed away, leaving room for something new as the morning of the third week began to rise. 3 weeks passed, and the rhythm of my days had changed in ways that felt both gentle and profound. My garden had erupted into full-bloom roses in shades of ivory and deep pink nodding in the breeze. I spent mornings trimming the branches and afternoons volunteering at the local library, shelving books and helping children find stories I once read to my own. The silence in my house had become a companion instead of a weight. Elizabeth and I had developed an easy ritual tea on the porch every other evening. We shared cookies or small slices of cake, talking about gardens recipes, and the peculiar freedom that came from letting go of people who only knew how to take. One evening, she brought over a small cutting from her rose bush, and we planted it in a corner of my yard, laughing like girls who had just discovered a secret. Life was simple, but it was mine. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed across the kitchen floor, my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Arabelle's final text lit the screen. "I guess you chose money over family." I stood for a moment, letting the words settle without pain. Then I walked outside into the garden, where the roses swayed in the warm light. I watched a single petal detach and float to the ground, as effortless as breathing. Without replying, I deleted the message. The quiet click of the phone felt like the last page turning on a book I no longer needed to read. "I didn't choose money," I whispered to myself. "I chose to live the years I have left as someone who exists." Inside, sunlight poured through Malcolm's favorite window, filling the room with gold. But this time, it wasn't his light, or even ours. It was mine, steady and certain, spilling across a life I had finally claimed as my own.